Hi, this is Aaron Azarod, and welcome to the third part in our series. What does it mean to be social? Imagine you are back in the third grade, and the most popular girl in class is having a birthday party. She prances around the room and delivers invitations that her mom obviously helped her make to each of the kids in the class. You notice that as she passes by your desk, a fiendish smile envelops across her face as she hand delivers an invitation to the boy sitting right next to you and passes you right on by. "But, how can this be?" You begin to question to yourself. Your eyes are now glued to this girl in the hopes that perhaps your invitation is on the bottom of the deck and that it is only a matter of time before she comes back towards you. And yet, you watch as the very last card is dispensed from her hand, and it has not landed on your desk. You hold back a tear as the others around you rip open their invitations, allowing that annoying glitter stuff to spill all over their desks. The teacher beckons the class, and you try and forget about what just happened, and you succeed until lunch. When you arrive in the cafeteria, you hear from your friends and the other classmates talking about how much fun they are going to have next Saturday. You almost feel as if you should confront this girl. You haven't done anything wrong to her. Sure, you're not the best of friends, but you notice that others far less deserving received invites. You end up never confronting her, and you never quite know why it is that you were excluded. Joining me in the final chapter of our socialization series, I am joined once again by Gabby. Gabby, you were once a teacher. What would you say to our third grade friend if you notice that they were looking a bit down, having been excluded?
Hi, Aaron. Thanks for having me again.
My pleasure.
Um, so, having been a teacher, I experienced a lot of this kind of happening on, the school playground and just the nature of the classroom, like picking people during activities and whatnot. And I think one of the top things as a teacher and even as a parent, you always want to remind your kid that there's nothing wrong with them. They're in the portion of their life, especially in third grade, where they're exploring like who they are and what friends they have, what interests they like. And I mean, that's just the beginning. That's we're not even getting to high school where it gets really serious. But again, if this child is in distress because they clearly didn't get invited to anything, that birthday party or event, you as a teacher should pull them aside and just remind them that there's nothing wrong with them. And then, if that were to escalate, there are a number of other things that you can do to not only reassure the child, but make sure that there's no further conflict in the classroom.
I think, as being like the eagle eye perspective of the classroom of what's going on and the different dynamics. Now, it could be the case that this boy and this girl really had a giant spat with one another, and then there's some kind of underlying reason why this girl would exclude this boy. Or, maybe this boy is like a royal pain in the behind, and he's gonna totally wreck that party and like hog all the games or something like that. But I think in the obviously perfect fictional scenario I set up here, there doesn't clearly seem to be anything wrong that this boy has done. He just seems to have been excluded. And it could be because he's awkward, or it could just be that he doesn't fit in as much as the other students. And I think validating somebody's humanity really comes first in these situations.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, when you deal with kids who are that young, it's difficult they're aware of what's going on, especially in third grade, because that's kind of, I feel like a lot of the malicious things that I experienced when I was younger, between like the cat fights and all that, a lot of it did start around like third, fourth, maybe even fifth grade. So it's not that they're not aware of what's going on. It's just, there's the question of like what they were taught from their parents and also
Mm.
maybe previous teachers, or just there sometimes are instances where those kids are specifically doing that on purpose to harm another kid.
Yeah.
Especially, I noticed it a lot more when I had classrooms that had children with disabilities, which was even sadder, even if it's not anything crazy. But I mean, I remember there was this one boy who had mild case of dyslexia, and he was a little awkward and like probably needed a good shower, but he was so funny and he was the sweetest, but he was always kind of on the outside because people didn't, they didn't acknowledge him because of his like quirkiness.
Yes. It's funny. I just had a conversation with my friend Kenny, and he said something very profound but grim at the same time. We have a tendency to want to crush anything that's different because it makes us feel uncomfortable. And I think that this girl might not think that there's anything wrong with this boy, but she knows that he's different, and that might create an unsettling sense amongst her and her friends. And she may not be, I guess in the example I use, she has like a malicious grin, and we can talk about that later. But sometimes people get excluded because it's like, you're too much of an inconvenience. You're going to create so much awkwardness, and I don't want to hurt you, but I don't want to have the responsibility of dealing with your awkwardness.
Oh, that's so sad when you think about it being in third grade. I think I've been on both sides of that coin as the person who didn't receive the invite for that reason, or the person who didn't invite someone specifically again for that reason. I'm not proud of that, but it does, to your point of like, we like to exclude things or kind of dump them to the wayside when they're different. I'd see that all the time. I mean, even from an adult perspective, exchanging new and different ideas, like something so vague and general as that, and even down to the granular, like, where's this shirt that I don't like, or it offends me, or has this X political view, or has this does this weird event, or plays this X sport. Like, there's always something that if you have differences, it just
Mm.
pushes you farther apart.
Yeah, yeah, and then it could be just orderliness. It could just in the sense that, like, I want all the blue, toys in that column, and I want all the green toys in that column, and there's something about that person that might present disorder to your party, right? Because, like, what if that kid makes an inappropriate joke? Or what if they ask my friends kind of like an inappropriate or awkward question? And that kid may not be trying to derail your party. It's just that they may not have a high level of social awareness. And it takes a lot of work. And I don't obviously expect a third grader to be able to do this, but it takes a lot of work to kind of preface things like, oh, okay, my friend um, Mark is going to be coming along. He's a little bit different. Just don't mind too much what he says.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't expect a third grader to do that. They don't have the prefrontal cortex fully developed so that they can make those, those high level thoughts. I mean, even I feel like as adults, a lot of people don't even have that.
Yeah.
Sadly, it doesn't register to people to, again, bringing new people to the conversation, or wild ideas, or even prefacing things. I mean, I've been in situations that no one told me anything in a show, but I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? You didn't tell me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think all of this, and there is like a selfishness component too, because like this and I think this is something that a third grader can process, or maybe let's use like maybe a sixth grader, someone a little bit older, that this is going, like, bringing happiness to this boy by inviting him to my party is going to make him happy, but at the same time that's going to detract from my personal happiness, because now I have this person or this agent at my party who is cleaning little messes that I have to tidy up.
Again, I don't know if a sixth grader necessarily will have those processes, but
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, I do. I mean, I have had experiences or heard something where kids, they just, like, I forget where it was. I think it was on Instagram, or it was some article where it was this family went to, I don't know, 7-Eleven or whatever. And there was like, on the shelves in front, there's like candy and Tic Tacs and whatever. So this little girl said, oh, can I have all these Tic Tacs? I want to bring them home. And he's just thinking she wants a lot of Tic Tacs. But as she's in the car and they're driving home, she's saying, oh, this one's for mom, and this one's for dad, and this is one for my friend. And like, she basically assigned to give out all her TikToks. Oh my God, Tic Tacs,
TikTok, right?
Tic Tacs out, to everyone. At the end, she didn't have them for herself. So I think young kids do have a understanding of, what it means to be nice and sharing and things like that. But I don't know if she's mentally processing at the same time that that's actually happening. She's just doing it because she wanted to give it out. But it's interesting too, because when you get into second, third, fourth grade, you start to have that, I don't want to say selfish, but you start to, that innocence starts getting chipped away. And so maybe that's when the switch starts flipping. And again, the maliciousness might start to come out, or the spite, or whatever it is.
Yeah, you know what, Gabby? I think you're actually poking a lot of holes in my story, which I really appreciate. Let's take this third grader and advance him like 10 years. Let's make him 16, right? I think we're gonna have a little bit more because there's so much that we want to just right away as, oh, they're children, but let's go ahead and make them teenagers because I think and the same, let's say they're teenagers and the same exact thing happens. And let's go back to the example where she has like a evil grin or something on her face. Where does that maliciousness come from? Yeah, I'm going to exclude this person and they're going to feel like shit and I'm going to feel really good about myself. I'm wondering where that kind of comes from.
I think a lot of it is, well, it's how these kids are raised or how they're taught. It's just, I have noticed a pattern with certain people. Like, there are the really popular kids, and some of them naturally would go towards chipping away at people who are maybe not as confident as they are. And so, what ends up happening, it's funny too, on the flip side, is that those people who are chipping away at other people actually have less self confidence in the people that they're actually hitting. And
Hmm.
50% of the time, it's actually jealousy. So they actually have something that the person who's hitting them with that negativity or maliciousness or whatever it is actually wants.
Whoa, that's some Sigmund Freud analysis there. I like, I'm loving that. So let me just repeat what you said just to make sure that I got that right. So in other words, I'm this girl and I might even have like an insecurity that this boy might be more popular at the party or just might like outshine me and I'm trying to exclude him from my party because I don't want any competition there. I don't want any competition of somebody who might sort of surpass me or be more of the socialite than I am. So I kind of invite weaker people so that I stand out that much more. Is
I
that
mean,
what you're saying?
that's definitely a possibility. I mean, that's especially when you talk about younger kids, especially the teenagers, because it's so much hormones, and there's like so much going on that they're just like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. Yeah. So again, if we even went back to the third grade example, so let's say, it's this girl's birthday party and it's supposed to be all about her. She's getting the gift, she's blowing out the candles, it's all about her. And then, you invite this quirky person who, again, it's not about them, but maybe because of their quirks, they get some of the attention
Yes.
because of the fact that they're quirky and weird. And, maybe that person doesn't even want to risk having that happen.
Wow. I think that's an interesting. That's a very interesting social dynamic where it's like only one person. There's only room for one person in the spotlight, basically, and you don't want to invite anyone to your party that might detract from your spotlight. And I think that that is perhaps a social consideration that I think that's definitely a teenage thing to do. I'm also wondering is and this is something that like I hear you on that. Do you think it's also possible that there is a sick pleasure that people get in watching someone else being excluded or ostracized from a group? Because I think that there is the spotlight thing, but I do
I
feel like
think
there are.
so.
I think there is a sick pleasure type of person. And this is going to be really difficult for the two of us because we're kind of nice people, I want to
I
imagine.
like to think so.
Right? So let's try and get into the head of what would make someone derive pleasure from excluding somebody?
That is a tough one. Sometimes people are just in a lot of pain, and
Yeah.
so they don't necessarily know how to process it. So the best way to do that is to inflict it on other people. And that has nothing to do with spotlight. It's just like, and it doesn't even have to be related. It just, people act in really interesting ways to try to make themselves feel better. Kind of like with the Band-Aid effect. I even see it at work too sometimes. And it's not like, for example, one of the people that I work with, she she basically was training me, and so she trained me one way, and then a couple months later I was told I was doing it the wrong way. And so here I am, this new person, thinking I got taught one way, only to realize that she taught me the wrong way. So I'm thinking I'm doing a good job, and she's the one who's also monitoring me. Whereas maybe in some sense, without her even knowing, she's technically throwing me under the bus to make herself look better. And not, I don't even think she's aware of that. It's just an inkling of a thought that maybe that's the case because she's an overachiever and likes to be the star of the show and likes to be the person who's like amazing, even though we're a whole team. Maybe that's the case too in a scenario in high school, even though that person isn't even aware of what they're doing.
I like what you said here about being in pain. And it actually makes me think of something like if we kind of think of life as a pyramid, right? And maybe that girl who's excluding that boy has just been rejected by some other boy who she perceives to be higher on the pyramid or on the hierarchy. So maybe some jock that she's vying after has now rejected her romantic advances or her efforts, and that's hurting. Like she's in pain because that person that has rejected her has invalidated her existence, and the only natural thing to do is to invalidate someone else's existence.
I mean, that sounds really dark, but it's definitely subconsciously, I think a lot of us are navigating our lives that way. Yeah, it seems like it's a prevalent thing that's happening more and more, especially with the rise of using technology and social media. I mean, throwing hate comments everywhere and all of that, and not inviting people to Facebook, those events, and well, pre-COVID at least, but um yeah, I feel like also a lot of people are in pain, and because we're not communicating that well in general, the pain is just getting worse. And we're also not teaching our kids and students and children and whoever, like, that no one knows how to really process these emotions or how to address them in a way that's not violent.
Yes, yes, yeah. I think that this is. I mean, these issues are definitely getting worse, and the communication thing is definitely starting to fail. And we'll get to that in the adult world. Like thinking about what we talked about last time with like you're creating like a Facebook invite. I think that that also gives people a godlike sense of power. Like, oh, this one's going, this one's not going. I'm inviting this person, and I think that like I think excluding people gives them like a godlike power of I am the great decider of who gets through these gates and who doesn't. And I think people also kind of do that as a way, like you said, with the band-aid, it's also just a way to feel better about themselves. And sometimes, they're excluding someone for good merit, like they were a jerk to you last week and you really don't want to see them. But other times it's a band-aid like measure to feel powerful.
I can definitely see that. I mean, now that you put it like that, it feels so weird. It feels so weird that would internally someone would translate themselves as being so up high on their pedestal that they can make decisions like that. I mean, I probably did stuff like that all throughout high school. Like, I mean, I had major transformation in terms of like mental and like friend groups and all of that. So, high school's it's a challenging time. There's especially I can't believe you taught high school because I couldn't even
I can't
navigate
believe
it.
it either at
Like
this point.
I like to deal with kids who are trying to navigate it too. Like it's insane.
Oh, you just actually made me think of another one. This one just completely got out of my head. Sometimes you're inviting people, and you might be a person that loves everybody, but now you've got one friend that says, "Oh, well, I'm not coming if he's there." And
Oh
now,
yes.
yeah,
That
yeah,
I forgot about that. That's like I well, we've had this issue so many times, especially in my close friend group, because my brother and his best friend from high school was like married to this girl and they recently got divorced. So growing up, they were together for 8 years. So we were obviously friends with the husband and the wife on like having separate relationships and then friendship with them like together,
sure.
right, as individuals and as the couple. And so now we have to be super mindful of how we invite them to things because they don't want to be together, but we want to hang out with both of them. So it's like, we'll add this one to this party this time, but then add the wife to the other party so we can balance the friendship so that they don't get offended or they're not upset that the other one is there.
See, that's, I mean, and that takes a lot of mental gymnastics. And the problem that comes from that is that sometimes you have really high stake events. It's like, okay, well, we're going to invite this one to our wedding, and we'll invite the other one to that sort of thing a little shindig that we do like a month later. So I hear what you're saying, and we're trying to be nice about it. I don't know if it always gets perceived that way, because people are going to be like, well, she got to go to the big fancy wedding and I only get to go to this stupid thing, 2 months later. I'm wondering if as the person that loves everybody, do you owe it to either just invite both of them and let them figure it out and kind of deal with that discomfort? Because it's like it's kind of not right that it's kind of not right that they make you the executioner for their hiccups.
Yeah.
I don't think that's right, that I don't really like this person and therefore I'm going to make you execute them from this gathering for my convenience. I think it should be a situation of like, well, I love you both and this is the way it's going to be. Try and avoid each other. I won't sit you next to each other if it's one of those kind of events, and like just be an adult or just be a person that avoids them. I don't think it's right for them to make you the executioner.
Yeah, I wish that was the case. I mean, I feel like this happens all the time, and I'm really glad you brought it up because the more that I think about it, I recognize like in my family, in my personal life and work, it happens constantly, and it does make it challenging too because if people get upset that you didn't include them in something, you're kind of back to square one. But if you kind of leave them to figure it out on their own, it's also hard because sometimes they're just not mature enough to like want to do that, or they just maybe they're in a painful place of a breakup or whatever happened and they're not ready to have that conversation or be in the same space. And then I don't know, it's a sticky situation. I don't necessarily love the idea of having to choose one or the other, so sometimes I don't invite anyone in that whole situation.
Yeah, that's also a smart thing to do, is like, well, either both of you are coming or none of you are coming.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a situation like that. I'll be completely honest here. What ends up happening, and I'm not a saint, is that I just end up defaulting with the closer friend. I think
Yeah,
that's
that's a good safe, like, you're gonna have fun too if they're closer to you.
yeah, but then so I invite the safer friend, but now I might be jeopardizing a future relationship that could have potential. So I'm kind of giving favoritism to someone who has legacy, or somebody that has like invested like more stock, or like a longer history with me or whatever.
I didn't even think about that. Like in terms of future development, I'm just thinking right now in the present. But now that I think about it, I do wish that maybe some people I did invite because, like, I had a really close girlfriend who we had a falling out with, but her brother was like, oh my God, he was so much fun. And like, not in a relationship type of sense. He's just like, if he was at the party, you knew there was dancing, there was singing. Like, he just was like a one man show, always laughing, no drama. He was really great. But obviously, like, how I became friends with him was through that friend. So without her, it's weird if he comes. So I just didn't do anything with it. I
Ye-
just let it be. And so
ye-
every so often we like message on Instagram, like, hey, how are you? And like da da da, and that's it. Like nothing else.
yeah, and that's kind of like you're actually shooting yourself in the foot, because in order to appease some other friend, you're removing somebody from your party that could have made that party really, really, really magical. Like that friend, you're not just doing that friend a solid, but you're also kind of shooting yourself in the foot by like, now no one gets to have this cool, magical singing friend at my party.
Yeah. Well, now that you say that,
No, I don't mean
I
to make you
mean,
feel
no. It's
bad.
also having me like while you were saying that, I was also kind of mentally reflecting, like, okay, so that as an adult, this is how I'm processing this scenario. So as a 16-year-old who's still developing all of your, your brain function, you're going through your hormonal changes, like how do you or how do us teachers teach these children to process these things or make good decisions so that they don't shoot themselves in the foot like I am?
No, I mean, this is actually, I mean, so first off, I'm just coming, I'm in the same boat as you. I'm becoming aware of these things as I'm talking to you. I don't think these are things I could have independently just come up. So like if we're just coming up with these things, I don't even know if teachers in America are at that level where they're even aware of what's going on. They'll probably just write it off as, oh, that girl's an asshole or that girl's a jerk or something. Don't worry like about her. But I think having an understanding of all of these other forces in the shadows, if you would, that are influencing who we're inviting to things and who we're excluding can help. I think it could help, and maybe even talking to that teenager or that third grade boy, I'd be like, well, who else is at that party? Oh my God, Andrew's there. Well, you don't get along with Andrew. Maybe it's kind of best that you sit this one out.
I guess that's a good angle to go at as a teacher, because you're also questioning the student to make them make their own you're asking an open-ended question so that they can answer it themselves, or like think, oh, I didn't think about that, kind of like what we do in this podcast. But it's something that I also need to start doing in my own my own life. Because now, okay, so you told me I was shooting my foot about having that person at my party, but then on the flip side of that, the negative is that he drinks a lot, and like he sometimes gets off his rocker and like goes way too big, and like so there's always,
Mm.
so I think maybe in some ways subconsciously there was some strategy that I did, but for this little boy, it's hard because as a teacher, right, you're trying to give them clues as to answer their own questions, but you don't know if they're at a place that they can be like, oh, well, I don't, what if he said like, oh, I don't, just because I don't get along with Andrew doesn't mean I don't want to go. I just
Right,
won't,
yeah.
I
And
just
that's
won't talk
true.
to him. I won't go in the ball pit. Like, and he
And
might even be like, I'm still going to go in the ball pit. Like, I don't care. I just want the cake.
and then the boy could also say, well, why does Andrew get to go and not me? It could,
Yeah.
like there's also that. No, but I actually like what you said just a second ago about this friend who maybe drinks too much, because you also have to, and maybe third graders or teenagers also do this, not in an advanced degree, but maybe at the subconscious level. They also think about the risk factor that guest poses to everyone at the party. And I'll give you an example of a third grader doing this. I don't want to play with Andrew. He doesn't share his toys. Like, you ever heard a kid say that before?
Oh yeah.
So
I never know how to answer
yeah,
that
yeah, but
really.
that's an example. Or let me rephrase this. I don't want Andrew to come to my party because he's going to steal everybody's toys, right? So in a way, that third grader is actually protecting the sanctity, and they're protecting the well-being of their guests, because if they invite this boy or they invite this person that is going to steal people's toys, then they have, like, if you're initiating a party, you have a onus, or you have an obligation to protect your guest in a way.
Yeah, and now that you point that out too, I actually do remember in different stories, same classroom, different child, but I remember someone actually being excluded, I think, from, it was like, maybe it wasn't a birthday party, but it was some event that was outside of school. And I think one of the girls was like, oh, I didn't want to invite this one child because if he gets mad, he likes to bite. And I was like, oh, wow.
Well, that's a good
Okay.
reason, yeah.
That seems like an okay reason. But I don't, I remember it just came to me. I remember that
Yeah, no, I
in
think
teaching days.
I think with the exclusion stuff, if there's like clear cut evidence against a person, right? Then you can excuse exclusion. Like, being bitten is a really good reason not to invite somebody. You don't want Hannibal Lecter up in your
Oh,
wedding,
God.
like I totally feel that. Okay, you ready to move on to the adult world? The more
Yeah.
nitty gritty adult world? Okay. I will share an example from my own life, and I was attending a work conference in New Orleans, and there was this one guy, and we didn't particularly get along, but whatever, we acted like, just like, we kind of just tolerated each other. And when we're in this conference, I'm along with some other people, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to be meeting up with some of my friends locally in New Orleans," and he invited everyone else. And when it came time to me, he's like, "Oh, I think Aaron," and he said this in front of my face. He was like, "I think Aaron would find my friends like a little boring or something." And like this was like female teacher arguing, being like, "That's really rude of you." He's like, "No, no, it's just he's not going to understand my friends or whatever." And like obviously this had nothing to do with my benefit, right? This had more to do with like I don't want this square hanging out with my friends right now. And he made that call, and I was like, I kind of just jumped in there before I was like, no, no, no. I said, I'm feeling tired. Let me go back to the hotel.
So he did one of those where he like justified his really like crappy excuses for why he didn't bring
well,
you. Like, I mean, I do
see.
that too to like save the other person from the embarrassment of like throwing themselves under the bus by looking like an ass. But like, that's,
No, I wasn't. I
not
actually
great.
wasn't doing it for his benefit. But what it was actually is from a very young age, Gabby, I learned never show up to a place that you are unwanted. That's
Okay, that's a very good.
yeah.
That's a really good thing that you learn when you're younger because I don't think I got that nugget of gold
Like
until my late
no, no, no.
20s.
Because I think I learned from a very young age that if there's a fight to get you somewhere, then maybe you ought to not be there. And we can definitely discuss like how much push and shove that I should have applied in that situation. But that's an instinctual thing that I have of like I'm not really wanted there. It seems like there's a lot of negative energy coming from this. I'm not wanted, therefore I'm not going to make these people miserable because they're going to end up hating me. If I end up showing to this party and just force my way in like a party crasher, then they're just going to end up hating me more, and that's going to kind of justify their own negative. I don't really care about their beliefs, but why would I want to be in a place that I'm not wanted?
Yeah, that's a really great point that I really need to start using in my own life. But I do, I mean, that's happened to me a lot too. And it's not the greatest feeling when someone or the best is when they say like, oh, we're gonna be out late. I know you like to go to bed early, so I would just maybe sit this one out, or like,
Oh
oh,
yeah, yeah.
we're gonna go to this club and we know you. So they frame it in a way so that they're purposely not inviting you or extending the invitation, but they're throwing in these little bits that maybe play to your I don't know, your personality or the way that you would react, so that you already say, you know what, actually I want to go home and go to bed, or like Netflix and chilling sounds so much better. Why would I want to go out?
So what they're doing is they're giving you an out so that you can save face, right? Like they're like they're not outwardly saying we don't want you to come, but they're giving you this out so that you can just be agreeable with that out and be like, yeah, yeah, you're right. Loud techno music is not my thing or whatever. But here's the thing: it's not for your benefit, Gabby. It's not for my benefit. There is this desire, I think, and this is something that it's good that we started off talking about children. I think that we have a desire, a selfish tendency to preserve our own happiness at the expense of others. And if somebody, if they know that inviting you to the loud techno club, if you're not going to be a good fit and somehow your presence there is going to disrupt them from meeting guys or drinking as much as they want to, whatever it is that they want, they're selfishly sacrificing you so that they can have the most optimal experience.
I mean, that sounds accurate. I
Yeah,
do like,
yeah.
no, I do think though there's always a flip side to that because, there's sometimes, yes, they're doing it purposely. Maybe sometimes they're not doing it purposely, or they know you well enough to know like you actually aren't going to enjoy this. So I'm doing you the
Mm,
favor of like pushing you away. But then if you take it a step further, something that I've learned too over time is that, and this is maybe again, because I did a lot of self-development work, is that often when I have a cringy moment or a moment of not wanting someone included in something, it's because yes, it's uncomfortable, or you're afraid that they're going to say something that might cause some conversation that you don't want to be had. Like for example, I have a friend who's really like into politics, and like in certain
mm.
scenarios I wouldn't necessarily want to bring her because of the fact that politics sometimes get heated, and sometimes I just want to go for a drink and not talk about things that are so serious, like just trying to have a drink and enjoy myself. But one thing I'm noticing as an adult, and something that I would encourage others to do, is to recognize the uncomfortability with it, and also recognize that bringing that person along for the ride, they can also help make the flow in conversation. They could bring other things to the table. Maybe you go to that, you don't want them to go to that techno club, but then you find out that coincidentally enough, they actually know the bouncer, and then you all get in for free. Like you never know. Like maybe they were neighbors. Like there's so many coincidences, and it's such a small world in general and in relation to connections that, or conversation, I should say, not just connections, but something like someone that you think you're not going to have any sort of commonalities with it most often, especially now that in the age of Netflix where like everyone watches TV and there's always a TV show that you can connect with on. It just you never know who can bring something to the table if you're willing to take a shot.
I like what you said. Actually, you kind of make me feel better in the way you just described it about this whole exclusion thing. If you do view people as kind of as ambience, because there is a point to be made that if you've got ultra political junkie, and that's fine. I'm obviously into politics and so forth, but you have to know when to shut it off, right? Like you have to know,
Oh yeah.
you have to know when to shut it off, and or the one, sorry, not to offend any like vegans out there or vegetarians, is like you don't want to bring one of these people to a restaurant and they're like, ew, meat. I've actually dealt with that situation before, and I'm like, okay, you can order the thing that does not have meat and enjoy it, but you can't just sit there and make other people feel uncomfortable that they want to have a hamburger. Like you don't have the right to do that. You eat as healthy as you want and have your beliefs. I respect that. Love you, man. Love you, lady. But don't make, and that's fair, because you're not actually doing a very callous thing in that moment. You're like, this person cannot survive in this ambience, and therefore the ambience is going to be destroyed by inviting them, right? And then that's kind of like inviting the vegan to the barbecue fest.
Yeah. I mean that's kind of, it's not your fault, it's theirs. It's they have to monitor themselves and recognize that everyone's different and they don't always have your viewpoints. It definitely varies from group to group because some people would argue that you being the meat lover is not being respectful of them, but then it could go either way.
I think if I was, it's funny. I've never been in the opposite situation where I'm like, okay, guys, this is a vegetarian restaurant, and then I pull out my lunchbox with like my hamburger. Like, I think that would, I think that would also be the same level of disrespect. I think that obviously the majority of people eat meat and not the other way around. But yes, like if there was a party that it was vegetarian only and I was invited to that party, I would keep my meat loving tendencies on the down low for that party out of respect for the other people there. Like I wouldn't be complaining like, ugh, you guys are just like little bunny rabbits eating your salads or something. I would just be like, wow, yes, tofu. I so enjoy, like, again, like I said, I would just, I wouldn't lie, but at the same time I would be accommodating to what's available. You know what I mean? Accommodating.
Yeah, I mean, not all adults understand that term. So, I mean, I'm dealing in corporate. There's such a variety of people that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, and it just blows my mind that I don't know if it's old age or just in time. People just they don't give a shit. They just don't.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's all about them, and it's funny. You almost go from, as a kid, you're not intentionally being selfish, but it's in your nature to be selfish. And then as you get older, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to high school, you start to learn more about, doing things to others, treat the person the way you want to be treated, and, all this stuff. And then by the time you're like in your 20s, again, you're having that self reflection, you're trying to figure yourself out. And then it seems like as you get older, the level of like selfishness increases, and then you kind of get to that stubborn place of like it's just like a cycle of like.
It's funny, Gabby. Like when we started this conversation, I was like, "There's no way that the person doing the excluding is gonna come out as a good person." Like I can't imagine that happening. But it actually seems like there are some examples of when that exclusion person is doing some justice to the world. And I'll give you another example. I don't do any kind of drugs at all. I do none whatsoever. Yes, I occasionally have a drink or so. I feel that I have probably been excluded from things because I don't do drugs, and the people at that party really wanted to do that. And in that instance, I'm actually fairly appreciative of their consideration of like, oh, Aaron doesn't really do that. Maybe it's best he sits that one out. And I'm actually seeing the nuance in this where those people are actually looking out. It's not just a selfish thing on their half of like, let's have our drug ambience maintained, but they're also kind of looking out for me and making sure that I'm not in an environment that's going to make me highly uncomfortable.
I have actually been in a scenario like that where I didn't know there was going to be drugs there, and I showed up to a party, or we were going to have a couple drinks, hang out, and then go to a couple bars in the Lower East Side. And I remember just like the shock. I like felt so uncomfortable and like immediately left and told them like meet me at the bar because that's where I'm going. I don't want to be here. And so in that moment, I actually would have wished that they either didn't invite me or at least told me ahead of time so that I could be prepared and then make a decision on my own whether I was going to go or not. Because in that
Yes.
moment, I like that whole night ended up being terrible and I did not have a good experience, specifically, I think, because of that beginning moment. But I would never ever want to put someone in that place. And I mean, that's just me, but
Yeah.
not cool.
No, this is actually quite amazing because, in one sense, when you have friends that are like, "Oh, Gabby, you're not going to like it. There's annoying techno music." That's like warning you, like a fake warning. That's like a fake warning of like, "I just don't want you around. Get lost." But then there's real warnings that friends give you, like, "Oh, shoot, there might be some drugs there, and you might feel uncomfortable. Is that something you're okay?" Like, so it's funny, like the same behavior has like an evil application and then it has a virtuous application.
It's funny you bring this up because it almost takes me back to our conversation earlier this week when we were talking about, do you want to be lied to or do you want to be told the truth? And I think in some instances, like, do I necessarily want my friend to be like, hey, there's like literally coke in the next room, or do I want them to be like, no, like that room is closed off, like we're not allowed in there. That's like they're storing all their valuables in there. Like I don't know which one. Like if I knew that that was going on in there, I probably would have like a freak out and like not want to be there and like kind of ruin the whole night for my friend, for myself. But if I didn't know about it and again nothing bad happened, like would I be okay with that situation? Again, like this is out of context. Like I don't want any cops involved. I don't want anything anything bad to go on. I don't want to touch it. But I don't know. It sometimes it's what's that phrase? It's like ignorance is bliss.
So here's my answer. I guess I don't know if this is possible, but ideally when someone says, "Oh, there's coke in the other room" or something like that, ideally I don't even want to be in that house at all. I don't care what's even going on in that room. Like it's actually unsettling that even in an adjacent room something is going on. And I think this is where the truth always sets you free. And I think that those friends who at least have an idea that there's a high probability that that kind of activity is going to be on, that's where they let you know over the phone. That's where they let you know far in advance that something like that kind of behavior is going to be going on. Now, your friends, they themselves may not know that that's going on until it's already too late. And then the only thing that they can do at that point is warn you, "Oh, by the way, there's coke in that room." And that's okay because they themselves did not know. And this is like
Yeah.
they're just warning you at the last possible second. They just found out themselves. But if they have any inclination or if they have any idea that something like that is going on, they owe it to you to tell you the truth as soon as they know.
Yeah. Well, that's a different scenario just because it's illegal and there's a possibility of danger. Also, at this point in my life, I don't have anyone who I'm friends with that would do something like that. We're all kind of the same place mentally and like how we treat our bodies. And so I don't see myself being in a situation like that going forward.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something that all of us, like if you're constantly being put in situations like that, or you're being excluded, or like this is like maybe you need to start reevaluating the people you're with because those people aren't taking care of you. They're not looking after you.
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties into the first two conversations that we had where you have to really these things are going to happen to you in your late teen years. They're going to happen to you in your early 20s, and they make actually for quite interesting stories, and then that weird guy walked through and I was like, "I'm getting out of here," and I hailed a cab and just like they make for interesting stories. There does come a point in your life where you expect more from the people that you're hanging out with, and you expect that if they are excluding you, it's out of love exclusion. And if they, and I think that's a magical place to be with people where you trust them that when they say, Gabby, you want to sit this night out, this is not going to be your thing. You love them and you know them so well that you really take their words at face value.
I mean, that's the goal. I think we all want people in our lives who are like that. It's
Yeah.
definitely it's hard to come by, and it does take a lot of work internally for yourself and externally to find, do the weeding, if you will. I meant to ask you though, I have curiosity. Do you think common sense or like gut feelings kind of fall into the bucket of socialization, or no, not at all?
I think they do past a certain age. So I think that when we're younger, and this varies onto the individual, but as we're very younger, we're highly, highly, highly curious. We're highly curious about people. We're like, oh, I want to hang out with those kids. And in your teenage years, at least, you're going to make some mistakes, or you're going to end up at a party that you regret being at later on. And there's some people that are more mature than others, but I think that gut feeling sort of develops out of experience. I think that
Yeah, that would make sense.
when people say, man, this house looks really sketchy, or I don't really, why are there illegal fireworks back there, like, you kind of just get to this point where your gut acts up because you've had a prior encounter with sketchy behavior that sort of triggers that, and like, so some people believe that you have gut feelings, that's the universe just like whispering into your ear. I might And then there might be some of that, but I kind of think that it's just your subconscious being like, hey, Aaron, don't these people remind you of those kids from high school that were pretty bad to you?
Or even this is another thing you could tie it in is, do you think this like in some way reminds you of an X TV show or movie, which, right? I mean, we don't want to necessarily be taught or programmed by TV and movies and
Yeah.
things like that, but if we're watching like Ozark and it's all about like the drug cartel, like, all these people in a black van with guns, it doesn't seem like it's right. There might
Yeah,
be a
yeah.
problem here.
The only thing is the one thing I will say is that TV makes it super obvious who's the bad guy, right? Like, TV is like, well, the guy with the bald head and the scar going down his face, he's obviously the villain. And real life is just so much more complicated, Gabby, because believe me, especially, let me just tell you about Manhattan a little bit here, is that you have some very gorgeous looking, guys and gals, beautiful looking people, but they're up to some really, really corrupt shit. And like they
Oh
like,
my god.
that's kind of like there is like an evilness to Manhattan in a way that you have these like really tall, like 6'5", and like these girls that wear these like high heels, and they're really skinny and gorgeous looking with the blonde hair or whatever. But some of those people, by television standards, and they would appear to be the protagonist, or they would appear to be the good guy, but then they invite you to some party and you realize, holy shit, these people are rotten to the core.
Yeah, and it's funny because in psychology, you equate if you're symmetrical, if your face is symmetrical, you automatically assume that they're good, and that goes back to people who are quirky or different. Maybe they don't necessarily have that symmetrical, beautiful face or figure, and you automatically think they're the bad guy, but it's actually swapped. It's flipped.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's what makes life like very complicated. And this is why you need to know, you have to look past the surface, and you have to really get to know people. I think the only way to really avoid these types of people is to not just be like, those people are gorgeous, pretty, cool, hip, popular. Let me see what they're all about. Like, let me ask them a moral question. I'd be like, hey, buddy, if you saw someone drop 20 bucks, the guy standing in front of you, right? Would you pick that 20 bucks up, or would you be like, hey, sir, you dropped 20 bucks? If that dude says, I would pocket that or whatever, that's like a little window into who they are, right? Like, so you can ask
But
like
do you think they're actually going to tell the truth? Because there might be people, it's like when they do like beauty pageants where they're like, I want world peace and like hunger. And like they want to end hunger. And it's kind of like, well, do you really? Or you're just saying that to, again, go on with the facade?
I
And then
think
also, when you think about all that, how do you even teach that to a kid?
no, kids, they're helpless. God bless them. I think you make also another good point. Well, what do we do about our phony baloney people? So maybe maybe it's always wise to keep a distance from people at first. And what I mean by distance is like don't talk to me, like not that kind of distance, but have at least 3 to 5 conversations with the person before you actually go to a party with them or hang out with them, just so that you can see any holes in what they're saying, right? Because if you talk to somebody once, you're like, whoa, what a rose colored, beautiful, optimistic worldview you have. But then if you speak to them a third time, a fourth time, a fifth time, a sixth time, you're like, wait a minute, I'm seeing a pretty dark pattern beginning to merge here. So I hate to say it, but maybe as we get older, we have to have our guard up a little bit more, which sucks because now there's tons of wonderful people we might be filtering out, but at the same time, we have to protect ourselves.
Yeah, I mean it's hard because there's not one size fits all. It's just constant experimentation and asking the right questions and doing a lot of observation, a lot of observation.
I think that as a general rule with with socialization, give everybody their honest chance. Give them their day in court, or give them their chance. And I really wrapping up our whole series is like there's so many good questions that we could look like. Is this person just having a 5 minute conversation with me and then running away, just like we talked, I think, in the first episode? Like, that's a little suspicious. They seem all happy and unicorn like, but then they don't have much to say past 3 minutes. It's a little weird. So are they having a deep conversation? Are they intentionally omitting things? Has the story changed? You said on Tuesday that you were there at the soup kitchen, but now on Friday you were at the clothing drive. It's like, where is the story being consistent? Is are you being able to go really deep with that person? And I think these are sort of vetting mechanisms that we can all adopt.
Yeah, and I mean, we're as we continue to grow older and read more and more research is done, we could probably find out better strategies, or find out from other people their experiences to
Yeah,
make better decisions in the long run.
I think so. I think that experience with socialization, and this is why I think obviously the pandemic is a travesty, but I think that yes, you do get wiser as you get older, but you never become wiser until you actually start reflecting. If there, I hate to say it, but there are 80-year-olds out there who are really old, right? But you can tell,
Yeah.
right? But you can tell that maybe they haven't been as reflective as they should be, and they're still kind of making the same mistakes, and they're still hanging out with the wrong crowd in the senior center because they're not giving themselves that space to be like, well, geez, who here is really my friend? And I think one thing that the pandemic has done, whether you're young, old, a teenager, or whatnot, is it really has given us that space to carefully reflect all of the relationships in our lives.
And rediscover who you are because who you were pre-COVID is probably very, very different than post-COVID.
Yes, yes, and hopefully for the better. Gabby, thank you so much for being on the show and having and doing this wonderful series with me.
Thanks, Aaron.
This concludes the 46th episode of the Truth Island podcast. I'm Aaron Azarod.